Yeah, run response. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Conversation 473. It's been an afternoon of protest here in St. George's, and that's going to be the focus of our program tonight. The George Floyd issue is setting a fire across the globe. People are angry, even across race distinction. People are very, very angry, very upset to have seen that video of a black man being killed by police officers, as we say in Grenada, in broad daylight on the streets. He died on the streets of Minneapolis begging for his mother. And it's a very moving video, one that has roused people, starting in Minneapolis and spreading across the globe. And this movement for George Floyd and an acknowledgement of the black person's right to equality in this world has come here to St. George's, and outside of the U.S. Embassy is where the voice of Grenadians was taken today, as people sent a message that enough is enough on the issue of racism and the attacks against the black race in a lot of countries in the world. So this is going to be the focus of our program: what took place at the U.S. Embassy today, outside of the U.S. Embassy today in Lansing, St. George's, and what it means, the global issue surrounding the George Floyd issue, what it means for black people, where do we go, where we are, and where we go from here. So Don Decoto is our special guest on this program. Don Decoto is an attorney and also an activist, and one of the persons who was part of that protest outside of the U.S. Embassy on Monday afternoon. Dozens of people came out to express their anger over what happened, their solidarity with the George Floyd situation, and their anger over the continued oppression and abuse of black people across the world. So welcome to the program, Don. And you're back again with us. We had a very interesting conversation, and we did say you'd be back. So here you are. And Kitaka is here as usual, and of course Rolanda, who also spoke at that protest and was moved to tears at that protest this afternoon, Monday afternoon, at the outside of the gates of the U.S. Embassy. So how have you guys been? Tired from this afternoon?
Yes, I must say. I'm starting. I will say yes. I am tired, but it's a tiredness that's worth, every of weariness at the end of the day, as part of organising and seeing such a successful protest today. So well worth it. Well worth it indeed.
Mm-hmm. So Kitaka and Rolanda, check in with me, and then we go to commercial break and come back and chat a little bit about what's going on.
One of the things I would like to say, sometime when our children get into trouble in America or England, we become ashamed. And there are lots of kids over there that haven't got the support of the parents because they still as Don will stay still in the shackles, you know. But as I said, you know, pray for our children, especially our young men. You know, the only time I rest is when my son is here with me in Grenada. You know, keep them in your prayer.
And of course, and Kitaka, you missed the protest. I missed you at the protest. I'm surprised that you were not there. So where were you? Fess up, confess.
Well, I don't like to discuss my personal affairs on live television, but I
Oh,
ended up going to the Grenada Association of Retired Persons. I had some other business to handle, and time went on. When I checked it, it was already 4 o'clock. So that was the reason why I was not able to be there. But I was able to attend the protest.
and of course, I am sure you would have made it. I'm sure you would have made it if you could. And just to let our viewers know, the Association of Retired Persons, they're going to be our guests on the program on Wednesday night. There's a lot to say about the situation with the elderly. So we're going to take a commercial break. And when we return, we're going to be chatting with Don DeCoto on the George Floyd issue and the wider issue of the status of Black people in the world.
It is time for Grenada to define for herself what independence means.
What has happened here this morning has made me feel confident to face the future with fortitude, strength, and with hopefulness.
People begin to understand that our lives don't have to be so hard. Things can change, you know.
We are all currently facing the same crisis and very similar challenges. And no one can afford to be myopic or bigoted in this fight. We have no choice but to work together.
We have heard the call, and we are determined to come out of this pandemic greater than we entered.
So, welcome everybody, and of course, we have some pictures and video from today's event. And we were hoping to get Jerry Edwin as well on the program. So we may be able to have him join us in a few minutes. But Kitaka, if you've got some of the pictures, just so our viewers can see some of what happened. I think we also have video of Don DeCoto as well, giving a very fiery speech at that protest today.
Yeah, so Kalisha, these were some of the photographs that I was received from the email, Kalisha. Don, are you here?
I'm here. Yep. Hi.
Okay, so sorry.
Yeah, Kalisha, the video of Don speaking. I did not receive that video of Don speaking, so that was a short video that I got.
Oh, just a short piece. All right. Well, we will try to bring that
Yeah.
to our viewers maybe later on in the program. And Jerry Edwin is going to be joining us in a few minutes on the program as well. He was there this afternoon. So we the pictures. We had whites at the protest, blacks at the protest. People of all colors came out in St. George's today, and there's protests across the world everywhere. It's impressive how this issue has roused the anger and the passion of people across the world. The question is, what happens after this? We've had anger and we've had protests, but the situation remains the same. Don, where do we go from here? People are fired up, but what happens? Where do we go from here?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question, but I think one of the things that I think George Floyd's barbaric murder demonstrates is that we have not made progress in the way that some of us, believe that we have. And I think that's a critical factor. We are still struggling as a Black people. But one of the things that I think is fundamentally different with the movement, the Black Lives Matters movement, that is a global movement. But one of the things that I think is significantly different is that this time, as a result of George Floyd's murder, is that we are not, as a Black people, standing alone. Yeah. There are people from all colors and creeds, standing up and making noises, showing support and solidarity against, the barbaric murder of George Floyd, and indeed our brothers and sisters that have also lost their lives at the hands of police and, other officials in authorities, across America, Europe, Canada, the UK. So what is the difference is that this has to be that moment of change where we no longer accept that we are second-class citizens and we're not really fighting as a few, but we are coming together as a many. And I think that is what's going to make the difference. I really do believe that. I've been involved in many, I'm an activist. I think, as I said today, many people wouldn't know that, especially folks here in Grenada, but that's what I'm an activist. I'm known as an activist coming out of the UK. Yeah. But let me tell you, there is you feel it in the soul that there is a difference. And, this campaign, no matter where we are, we're in Grenada, but the campaign, the world movement of this campaign, trust me, this is a new Black world order that we are embracing, and we have to prepare ourselves and be ready for. And that's how I see it.
Kalishka, your audio went left a bit. Check your audio out for a second. Done. But to track back a bit, what really moved and inspired you to take such a leading role in mobilizing and being at the forefront of a protest of that nature?
What you mean as a result here in Grenada of the protest today?
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you, as I said to my brothers and sisters today at the protest, listen, when I first saw the clip of George Floyd being murdered, I actually looked at it and disregarded it and said, that's fake news. Yeah, because as much as I know brutality happens and what have you, it's real. I just, that one went to the core. And it was a few hours later that my daughter said, Mum, have you really seen what's going on? This is real. Yeah. And what I'm saying, as a mother, yes, as a mother, yes, as a mother, as a human being, when you see that, I'm telling you, that just went to the core. To the core, it broke me. It broke me. And as soon as I saw it, I knew that there was going to be a movement, a world movement, in order to enact change. There has to be, no matter what we do, sometimes as a Black people, we go about and it's like a Martin Luther King mountain, a moment, isn't it? Shouting from the mountaintop, but there is times when there is one episode that it breaks and you think, right, okay, this has to enact change. And I really believe that from the moment I realized what was going on, and I spoke to Rolanda, my friend, And every day since that murder, I said to Landa, this one is going to the soul. And I can't step back. I cannot hold back, because I know if I was in the UK, I would have been the one, mobilizing. I would have been at the Downing Streets. I would have been there. So, here I am, and I'm like, well, how can I then, ensure that, here in Grenada, we make a difference, we make the noises, because at the end of the day, the discrimination and the prejudices, are real here, but how can I do that in a way, that's going to be positive? And I said, I said, I'm going to get on and do it. And it's just by interest. When I circulated, I pulled together a brief, notice on my Facebook. I sent it. I shared that with colleagues on Facebook. My colleague and brother Jerry Edwin, I didn't even know Jerry was trying to organize something at the same time. But I sent it to him because he has sent out an email to the bar in any event about just ensuring that we come together. And then because I wanted to ensure that my notice also of the publication got out, I asked him to circulate it, and he came back to me straight away and said, yeah, he's on it. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm not really into, listen, on these issues, right? It's not about sitting down and saying, well, we need to do it this day, we need to do it that day. We need to take action, and we need to get in, and we need to do it now. And what I didn't want to do, I didn't want to, protest, later on down the line when, the world is protesting and America is protesting today. I wanted to get the timing significantly at the same time as what's happening in America, in the UK, across Europe and wider.
Don, one of the things that you said when you spoke today was that you gave an example of the discrimination and the prejudice that you face coming home here in Grenada. We have a situation where we face the prejudice and the discrimination at the hands of people who look like us. It's almost as if they are proxy for the racist white people who believe that we should be treated in a particular way, who still look at us as chattel. How do we get past that? Where when there isn't a white person around to abuse you and discriminate against you, your black brothers and sisters are there in proxy.
Yeah, I mean, let me put this into context. Personally, here in Grenada, when I talk about racism, I think, as I said today, we've got to get real. The direct racism is not something that that I've endured, and I think that's what I need to say. But what I'm saying is the indirect racism, because remember, let me tell you something. The indirect racism, has more significant scars than the direct racism, because when you're discriminated against directly, where a colleague is coming from. You understand? The indirect racism is a different battle. And the point and the example I was giving was that, as I said, I travel a lot. For work purposes, etc., etc. But I'm telling you, I come land into Maurice Bishop Airport, and there'll be white passengers, coming out of on that flight with me, and we'll be in the line together, and I'm telling you, there'll be 5 or 10 of them in front of me, and I'll be next. And who is the one who out there, customs and immigration, who do they send for the red channel? It's me, the Don DeCoto. You understand? And when I get them, I tell them. You understand? I tell them and I ask them, why is it that it's me and not, Mr. and Mrs., Highty-tighty, who, have come off that same flight, etc. with me. And why this is important is because, let me tell you, going back to the point, Callistra, what we have here in the small island states in the Caribbean, let me tell you something. We are still the mentality, the legacies of the shackles, remains in the psyche of our Caribbean people, and that's a fact. Yes, that's a fact. We haven't released ourselves from the shackles. We see it all the time. Imagine, I'm in Grenada here. Yeah, I have clients coming to see me. Yeah, clients that are my mother's age. Clients that, you know, who I look up to, have total respect to as you know, clients. It doesn't matter the color. And they will tell me, they will refer to me constantly as Mrs. Decoto, Mrs. Decoto, Mrs. Decoto. Yeah, because I'm a barrister and an attorney. And I will say to them, Mrs. Whoever, please refer to me as Dawn. Because I see this, people say to me it's a respect thing. Yeah, and to a certain degree, it's a respect thing. But let me tell you something. It's the legacies of the shackle. It's the massa mentality. Right? It's ingrained. It's ingrained. It's systematic. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that. Of course, as a people, we have that level of respect. But I will go and facilitate training courses for corporate organizations. Yeah. And I have people referring to me as, you know, Mrs. Dakota. And I told them, call me Dawn. And it's in the psyche. It's how we program. It's how we program ourselves. And we you know, we don't want to release ourselves from the legacies of the shackles, the slave mentality. I see it all the time. I go to the islands. I travel in and out the islands for work and business. I see it all the time. You understand? But what we have to do, we have to break that cycle. So when today that protest was about George Floyd, and as I said, ensuring that his death isn't in vain, you know, and you know, the many, you know, the Trevor Martins, the Zinnemans, you know, you look at the people, you know, our black brothers and sisters who died in custody in the UK. You think about my nephew, Javan Richardson, 10 years of age. Yes? Hanged himself, my 10-year-old nephew, as a result of being bullied and victimized by the head teacher of his then school. Yeah? So I know where I'm coming from. I understand the battles. And let me tell you, it's the legacies of the shackles in these small island states. And we've got to bring it back to where we are. And these are the things that we have to change. We have to change that. You understand? We have to change and stop looking at when the white man comes. They are no better than me and you. They are no better than me and you. But what it is, you see, we see the white man for the dollar value that they bring, because no longer as a black people do we value ourselves from a dollar value. You understand? Because you remember, at the end of slavery, remember, we have to bring things in context. You remember when they abolished slavery, our slaves weren't free. Remember that. They had to work for nothing. And you bring it right up until the early 20th century, and you have the Garys and the Bastamantes of this world, you know, who shout from the mountaintop to get better rights for our people. You understand? And our black people were then the working classes. You understand? By the time they got benefits, remember the slave master, you know, had sold, you know, they took all the benefits after they left us dry. All of these things is that we have to edify ourselves, and we have to edify our people about. You understand? Because it's the reality. And if we don't understand ourselves as a person and our histories and our cultures, and I've spoken about this on the program before, you know, we are cutting ourselves short. So as part of this movement, as here in Grenada and in the small island states, these are some of the things that we need to progress to bring action, to make a difference. You understand? Because it's not just one or two, and it's not just going to happen overnight, but we have to come together. You understand? Because this, as I say, is the new world, the new black world order.
And you know, we always say we have to come together, and there's a long line of freedom fighters under our belts, from Haiti to Jamaica to Guyana, over decades and centuries even. Okay, we have always fought against what the white man has tried to make us into. and has tried to do to our race. But we're here in 2020, and I feel like we have not really made progress really in dealing with the core of the problem, which is fixing us up here, fixing us as Black people, dealing with the image. When we look in the mirror, what do we see looking back really at us, which is the core of the problem, as you just said. What we see ourselves to be and what we believe ourselves to be. I mean, I get that all the time. That if you act a certain way and you believe in certain things, you're considered to be out of place, an upstart. Who do you think you are? Because you're a little Black girl, that kind of thing. And here in Grenada,
Absolutely.
it angers me that I'm supposed to be in a box because I'm a Black Grenadian woman. And you know that this is the legacy that we have inherited from slavery. But coming together, we need to come together. What does that mean? How do we get our people to come together? How do we wrap up everything that we have tried to achieve, that our freedom fighters have tried to achieve over the centuries, really? How do we wrap that up and make it work and get us where we are, where we have our own pie, as one of your speakers said today at the rally?
I was speaking Kalisha today. I was speaking to a friend of mine, a Palestinian friend, and I sent him my placard. And you know, his word was, he said to me, he wrote back and he said, it takes more than a riot to achieve justice. Ask a Palestinian. I think we have to start fighting back. I think it's time to stop talking. Because, you know, this video with George Floyd, there is more coming out. There is videos coming out all the time. And as I always said, if England had the guns, we would have been having the same thing. You have the same thing in France. You have the same thing in Italy, whether it's Canada, everywhere. We have to start fighting back. A few will die, and as Louis Farrakhan says, they will kill a few, we will kill a few, and then we're going to talk. A lot of innocent people will die. But you know something? We pray for long life for our children. But I prefer to know my son died fighting than to die the way that George Floyd died. Because, you know, it is just so inhumane. And the stress we go through. I saw some people making comment. I must speak Rose. Rose is another lady from England. She started off the campaign on Sunday. And when she called me, I said to her, oh, well, you know, we planned one for Tuesday. And I must commend her for going out. When she went, it was just 3 of them there that started it. You know, so we have to remember them as well. And she has a
And
mother from England.
Miss McQueen, and we also have Jerry Edwin on the program, so we're gonna get back to your point in a minute. But welcome, Jerry Edwin is an attorney, and on I did not know, but an activist, as I saw today at the rally, at the protest outside of the U.S. Embassy in Lansing, St. George's. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Oh, I have my, I must say, I've earned my activism stripes. I have enough tear gas in my lungs, and I've worn enough handcuffs over the course of my activism in the United States, as in the fight against apartheid, against police brutality, and many other struggles. So I must say that I do not come to this new. Like my friend Don Dakota, when one lives in diaspora, when you live in North America and you have a conscience about what you see around you, you are compelled to act, and often that comes at a cost. But um, when you have the moral high ground, you do not check the temperature. You simply act. And sometimes it's you're arrested, you're beaten, or worse. But you have to keep going. You have to keep going.
So what has happened to George Floyd, which seems to have shocked the world into action? This is not. There are some people who are not shocked at the video. Some people who are saying, this video is one of hundreds of George Floyd's in the diaspora, in the United States, in the UK, in France, in places being treated badly just because of the color of their skin. So and you've seen this in different forms before, firsthand, yes, having lived in the United States.
Yeah, friends, I think that being black in America, and in particular being a black man, it is, but I don't like to, I wouldn't personalize it, because we've been in this struggle for many, many decades. I mean, and I mean me personally and my colleagues in the United States. Uh, I recall, and I like to point to the anti-apartheid struggle. Um, I always like to point to it. It's such a signal lesson in what happens when you persevere. I recall we did a dinner, because when Nelson Mandela was in prison, the head of the ANC, the African National Congress, was a man named Oliver Tambo. I remember we did a dinner for Oliver Tambo in Brooklyn, New York. Calistro, you'd be interested to know I was the caterer. We thought we would have 100 people, but we decided, let us cook, let us bake, and let us prepare, let us set tables for 500 people, although we were only expecting 100. Well, over 500 people turned up. And I remember afterwards, when all the crowd had dispersed and our colleagues from South Africa was just sitting around with us, and we were just small talking. And Oliver Tambo said, I'll never forget this. He said, "We may not live to see Nelson come out of jail." Do you hear me? He said, "We may not live to see Nelson come out of jail. But one thing we will do is keep on fighting." Many of us, I remember that morning, that Sunday morning, I was at home in Brooklyn, and a friend called me and said, "Turn on your TV." And I'm a member of the ANC International Bureau. Of course, I turned on my TV. And like the rest of the world, when we saw Nelson Mandela walking out of jail, I gotta tell you, there was not a dry eye anywhere. We never thought, and anybody who tells you different is a liar. We never thought, and we were in this struggle, putting our bodies on the line, spending our money and our time, attending funerals and memorials. We never thought Nelson Mandela would have come out of jail. I'm not in the media. I'm not telling you this as an outsider. In our hearts, we knew one thing. We had to keep fighting. On that, we were unequivocal. Unequivocal. We were going to keep fighting until the last breath came out of our body. But we did so not believing Nelson Mandela would come out of jail. The struggle for racial equality did not end in America in the civil rights movement. Yeah, let's bring it home. It didn't end in 1970 in the Caribbean, when those 6 students, Tim Hector, Tim always stands out for me. In 1970, the Canadians kicked out 6 students from the Caribbean who were there on scholarship, because there was a Black Power protest and those students were involved. I don't think Trevor Monroe was one of them, but certainly Tim Hector of Antigua was there. And let me tell you, the way in which they were unceremoniously kicked out of university started the Black Power movement here in the Caribbean. I remember as a little boy, 11 years old, or maybe 12, watching Anthony Pantin, the Archbishop of Trinidad and Tobago, locked his arms with Geddes Granger of NJAC, locked his arms with Rafi Shah, the lieutenant in the Trinidad Regiment who had led the mutiny. And I saw Hugh Francis of the PNM, ironically a cousin of mine, and hordes of young people marching every day. And Eric Williams says we have a state of emergency. You can't protest. This is a state of emergency. I remember in 1974, how old was I? 15? Eric Gary said, we have a state of emergency. You cannot march. And I saw Alistair Hughes. I saw my friends Ewart Lane. I saw my friends Basil Gahagan. I saw members of the Council of Churches, trade unions, Leslie Peer, marching with students. And ultimately, we got rid of Eric Gary. The fight for racial justice is not a fight that just began. Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, marched with Martin King. We saw people in the street. We saw friends. We are at a moment now like we've never seen in the anti-racial struggle. But here in Grenada, we are in a different context. Grenada is a sovereign member of the United Nations. Our people, we have a vote at the United Nations. The Black people in America don't. The voice of the Grenadian people here in this nation state carries significant weight internationally. I remember in New York, we used to beg and plead with representatives of Grenada to please vote against the United States in the United Nations, please. Don't vote with Israel. Don't vote with the United States. And the Grenadian representatives were voting with the United States. The United States was against the anti-apartheid struggle. Nelson Mandela was arrested by the joint efforts of the United States and the South African Defense Force. But I tell you, it's deja vu for me, but it's a pleasant deja vu to send a message to Grenadians in diaspora to say, we are with you. We're with you. You are protesting peacefully on the streets of Flatbush, Brooklyn, in Canarsie, in Manhattan, in Maryland, in Washington, D.C., in Miami. We are with you. It's a good thing to do. It's the moral thing to do. And so the power of our message, I think, cannot be lost on them. And today we had an effort today, and I tell you, my sister, Dawn Decoto, lightened and brightened my heart, because let's go on record, there were no other lawyers with the courage. No, when lawyers don't have courage, what kind of society do we have? But my sister Dawn reminded me, she said, Jerry, forget it. We're here and we will be there. When you are struggling, when you have the moral high ground, you don't check to see who is with you. You just keep marching. You just keep marching.
Kitaka, just a second, but I mean, one of the things that you talk about the anti-apartheid movement, and this was a world movement. I mean, almost everywhere people were fighting for South Africa. Within the United States, in the Caribbean, everybody was fighting. And yes, people, when you said we didn't believe that Mandela would be out of jail, I was pretty young at the time, at the height of the struggle. But I get what you're talking about. There was a time when people thought this was not possible, and it happened. But I'm saying the difference here is that I'm not seeing over the years, I'm not seeing that world movement and that world passion to to deal with the cause of the black race outside of what was happening in apartheid. That
You feel
happened
it now,
behind the
Calistro?
scenes, but the wider
It's now.
problem of almost
It's
so
it's it,
and so
it,
that
it's
and that's where I'm going. Are we there now? Are we there now? Do you feel we're there
it
now?
feels like it. Don, doesn't it feel like it?
Let me tell you, Calistran, this is what I was saying. I'm telling you, as Jerry said, as an activist, yes, similarly, I'm an activist. I may not have been, I may not have been so involved, but as an activist coming out of the UK, fighting and standing up with the families of Stephen Lawrence and Van Richardson's and watching all these injustices happen, I can tell you, there is a difference in the mood of what we are fighting for collectively. There is a difference. The timing is now. This is, as I said again, a new Black World Order. This is it. And in the same way Jerry just mentioned, at that time campaigning for Mandela, there was deep down, they believed that he would not be released, and he was released. But let me tell you, deep down, we know that in this movement today, as a result of George Floyd's barbaric murder, change is coming for this new Black World Order. It has to.
But Don, if you look at it as Jerry and you both yourself has said, I mean, as Jerry said, he's been fighting since the time of Nelson Mandela. Black people hasn't stopped fighting. I think the younger generation, maybe the people that are younger than us, I think they became comfortable. They become very, very comfortable because the older head, maybe the people that was there, most of them has gone on the Nelson Mandela and, the Winnie Mandela. And it seems like nobody has stepped into these people's feet. You have Farrakhan, who is an older, a very old man, and you don't hear no names coming up. And the young people has maybe thought, oh, the fight is over. But we have always fought. The slaves, we had the slaves on the plantation that was fighting, that was rebelling. So we have never really put our head down. But I think now the whole world is, as I said, my Palestinian friend said, we have to fight back. We have to teach the younger people that they're not going to get their freedom with the marching. They have to continue marching. They have to continue. We're on the front line now, and we cannot look back. We have to keep going. They have to get up. They have to fight, because we will not get our freedom if we sit down.
Can I come in for 1 second? Since you made that important point, Ms. McQueen, even today, like while I was, on and doing some research and so on, someone sent this message to me from Facebook, and I'd like to throw it out to the panel, because I think also what's important is to fight not only today, but to continue to fight, and not just fight in terms of protests and placards and so on, but to consistently fight for issues that are near and dear and burning across the island, especially within our local context. So the person sent this message to me, and I want you guys to weigh in on this. It was a Facebook post. So here it goes. So many issues in Grenada to protest about, but instead we choose to meddle in America's affair. Why not protest for or against the busmen and the price increase? Why not protest against Nawasa and the Milo water they deliver in pipes? Why not protest against the high cost of living in the country? Why not protest against the state of the roads that we are paying taxes on to maintain? Why not protest against the fact that we are opening our borders before opening our local businesses? Why not protest against the fact that the importation of vehicles will increase due to the lobbying of the two main dealerships down here when they have ties with the government? Why not protest for our healthcare situation? Why not protest for government to pay back money owed to NIS so the pensions won't suffer? Why not protest against the unsolved murder of Oscar Bartholomew and Betty Ann Lambert? Why not protest that our businesses was responsible for transmission, that one business was responsible for the transmission of over 50% of our COVID cases, yet they are allowed to open up for business, but the small man can't? Why not protest against our telecommunication rate and services? Why not protest for the local things that are born in Grenada right now. So guys, how do you guys weigh in on this in terms of localizing the protest and continuing that liberation to fight for things that are near and dear to the people in Grenada?
Can I just say here, I think that the point that Facebook message raises is important, right? And let me tell you, I don't want to belittle, yes, any of the injustices that our people in Grenada are facing on a day-to-day basis, okay? And let me tell you, they are just as important, yeah? But let me tell you, yes, in setting context and keeping things contextual, what we see and where we're coming from, when you are protesting from a world movement point of view, as we are, rightfully so, it's because, yeah, the knock-on effect of what is happening in Grenada, in America, in Europe, in England, yes, basically has a knock-on effect for all those injustices that poster, that person actually placed on Facebook. Because let me tell you something, a lot of those injustices that have been raised, but was raised by that, what you just read out, is as a result of discrimination, is as a result of, you know, people in authority treating our black people as second-class citizens. It is as a result of people in authority, you know, giving the white person and the right people, you know, privileges and making them feel that they are entitled and therefore privileged. You know, and as you say, opening some businesses as against others who are affected as a result of COVID-19. Let me tell you something. These things aren't in isolation. And dare I say, by default, you know, we are protesting for these issues as well. If that person had come to the protest today, they would have seen that some of the issues we were raising, we were setting the context in regards to what we're saying. Yes, George Floyd's murder may be in America, but you have to look at the economical and the sociological impacts as a result of race discrimination globally and how it affects us in the small island states, how we continue to be, and the reasons why we continue to be at the mercy, you know, of our colonial masters, you know, even though we're years away from independence. You have to set the context. And what I would say, we cannot look at this in isolation. You cannot separate them because they are interlinked. They are interlinked. It's our politicians that give certain people right away to make certain people and investors and whoever come in to make them feel that they are superior and make them feel and believe that they can come in and talk to local Grenadians as they want. I'm sure Rolanda would have shared with you her story when you had the white hotelier tell her, because she was chasing a bill that's rightfully owned to Mount Pure, that if she don't stop phoning for what is rightfully owned for, the white hotelier told her she's going to call Keith Mitchell. That's what we create. But we're not dealing with this in isolation. If you feel we can do with this in isolation, we're lying to ourselves.
I would just like to add that, if I may, that if this person, the poster on Facebook, feels so strongly about these issues, organize a protest. Organize a protest. There is no rule that says that Jerry Edwin and John DeCoto are responsible for organizing all the protests in Grenada. If this person feels strongly about it, I urge them, go out and organize. We will support you. We will support you. Yes. You know, there's there is a saying that all politics is local, right? All politics is local. And so the poster is reflecting a concern that he or she legitimately has issues at home right here in Grenada. Organize a protest. My brother, I wonder what are your views on this?
My views, well, for me personally, I have studied and looked at even the civil rights movement, the apartheid, Black Lives Matter started in 2013, and so on. And for me, I think we need some more alternative strategies as well. Because sometimes I think we get riled up when the situation happens, and the most times people fizzle off, and there's not a consistent strategic effort to really get certain things done. And I think that's what we always feel. Even if you want to fight the fight of the real fight of physical fight and other fights, we need to put a lot of groundwork in place. A lot of things need to be addressed because there are a lot of things within our system that actually props up that our education system. The way that we are socialized, which we really need to look at to really address the root causes of the problem as well. Even within our homes, because again, charity begins at home. Because I sometimes look at mother and daughter and father and so on fighting like dog and cat at home. So if there is not peace in the home now, how does that translate to the village? How does that
Let me ask
translate to
you,
the community?
my
How
brother,
does
let
that?
me ask you.
How does
My
that?
brother, let me ask you.
Can I finish? Can I finish? Make the point.
Yes,
1 second.
yes, of course.
Yeah. How? Because my thing is, I think how I am as a person, how I am in my family, that is a microcosm of what our society will be. So a lot of things need to be at the root core of the microcosm before it can manifest on a larger scale. So I think as well, even at the end of the day, like within your heart, my heart, that needs to be done where we can have that peace at home, and that peace can move into your school, move into to the community, move into your country, and we could really get things moving forward. But ask your question.
The issue is not how we feel personally, but how the policy of governments affect our people, everyone, not what we do in our homes. I want to
But yeah,
ask.
at home, you have to become conscious at home first to actually be able.
Kitaka, let him go where he's going with that point. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Jerry.
I am not referring, when we say that we are fighting a struggle against a government, a policy of a state. That state for 450 years has oppressed a certain racial group of people, a certain race of people. We are not referring to the interfamily issue. We are speaking of a state policy that has put its knee, whether it's its judicial system, its economic structure. That's what we are talking about. That's what we are talking about. There are fractured families everywhere. Black, white, green. That is not what we are talking about. We are talking about a state policy that has been perpetuated. The United States. Let me just say this. I like to use the most graphic example of exclusion, a national policy of excluding Black people by the United States. After World War II, Black veterans who fought alongside white veterans came back home to the United States. The war ended in 1945. The United States the government had a policy for veterans. It would create low cost, low interest mortgages for all veterans. And it wouldn't surprise anyone on this panel to know that wealth is created through, for the most part, through land acquisition, real estate acquisition. The United States government had a policy that it would give mortgages to all veterans coming out of World War II, except black veterans. And so we had, for the last 50, 60, 70 years, an exponential growth of white household wealth and a decline of black household wealth. So yes, at home, in the black home, you might have certain sociological issues that are brought about by economic issues. Similarly, in the white home. But what we had is a state policy by the United States that said, we are going to keep black people in poverty. In the 1930s, the United States had a Social Security Act, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. A massive social, coming out of the depression of the late 1920s. That policy excluded persons who were in the domestic trade. 80% of black Americans, all black Americans, 80% of them were involved in what? The domestic trade. They were excluded as a national policy of the United States. That is what we are discussing. When we talk about racism.
Jerry,
yes.
1 second there. I understand that point, but you have to understand we're going to the root because we're looking at how the black people could unite themselves as a force, as 13% of the American population, to unite as a force to strategically get those things sorted out. So it must go back to home where we have to unite so we could all have that one voice to say we want to put an end to this systematic racism. As it stands now, the divide is there, so we must have to bridge the divide so that we can be able to, in a meaningful way, move to get those things done, if you understand the point that I'm making. So it's not straight from the fact that it is systematic and so on, because you have to understand the history. I mean, the black community came from a period of being chattel, seen as property, seen as something that was not human life. And that happened when we fight. There was the bus boycott and the civil rights movement. A lot of fight took place where we got to a point where we entered into the system. But at a systematic level, the playing field was still not level because, again, a minority in America. So I'm saying right now, even through the Black Lives Matter protests, we are seeing serious divide in terms of where people stand. So we really have to deal with our internal affairs before we could go out to get this stuff done, because the fight has to be united as possible to be most potent and most effective and successful. That's the point I'm making.
But
I get your point, and I take it, brother, that you. By the way, are you in Grenada? Are you in New York?
No, right now I'm in St. George's, Grenada.
Yes. You've not lived in the United States, have you?
No, I've not lived in the United States. I'm a Grenadian of birth, so I've not lived in the United States.
Yes. So you're not aware of the struggle and also of the alliances that have been formed between blacks and other groups so that we could get to where we are today.
Well, I'm a student. You see, that's what me, because I'm a student of Marcus Garvey and a lot of the black fighters, you check? And I have seen the struggle and I've studied hard and I communicate with my ancestors continuously. So for me, I try to see us fight the fight. Listen to Miss McQueen. I want us to be more unit. We have to deal with our internal unity affairs first. We have to forget the media, forget them things as black people. We have to deal with things first where we could be together as one solid force. Africa, the diaspora, and so on, because without our nation state Africa being solid and strong to support us, the fight of 13% versus the 70-something% of white in America who are very armed and have all the systems and the wealth to use whatever they can use to fight us is a tough task. So we have to level the playing field by drawing on Africa, drawing on the diaspora in a serious and meaningful and unified way.
As Jerry was saying,
I've been quiet for a little while. Let me come in here and say, okay.
Kalistra, one thing I want to leave it at this point to say that in 2050, brother, the United States will be a majority country. That means that black and brown people will be the majority.
Kitaka, as Jerry was saying, I learned to fight. I didn't want to fight. When you live in places like England and America, you have a fight in you. Grenadians, when you finish that fight, you have nothing left in you. You fight, you don't even know the fight is coming. And the strongest ones survive. There is so many of our young people that couldn't keep up with the fight in mental hospital. There is more young men in mental institutes and prisons than in education. You know, you're fighting so much that you can't even think. You know, there was a saying when the British Airways come down from England, the mad people coming. Our people out there are suffering, right? The little fight we have in Grenada here is nothing for the fight that was our people. Maybe Jerry may need to, you know, as a barrister, may need to sit down and speak to these people and them over here and tell them the suffering that we have to go through, the fight. Every day is a fight, as I was saying today. You don't know when the police would knock. Your children don't have to do anything. You know, you go for a job, they advertise a job. When you walk in, they say the job is not there. They would look at you going into a restaurant. They will, the experience and what we have to go through, you have to be in that fight to understand that fight.
Well, I mean,
But listen,
I just think, you know, I mean, let's get back to the apartheid struggle, okay? That where millions of people around the world were not there, okay? They were not in Soweto and in the middle of the thing and in the fight, but they fought. And this was ground zero for the movement. And I believe that because the South Africans kept on fighting, people outside of South Africa were moved and motivated to do what needed to be done. I believe that the policies that need to change in the United States, because this is where the change has to come, it doesn't matter how much unity and how much the family unites and it spreads within the United States. It does not matter if the policies don't change. The system that is set up to keep Black people and in a particular circumstance, that is not it's not going to make a difference. What is going to make a difference is lobbying. And my thing is, what are we outside of the United States doing to push that movement? Okay, this is it was what happened outside of South Africa is what freed Nelson Mandela, because they were fighting and they were fighting and it got more brutal and more problematic and the results were not coming. It was the movement, the people who moved their politicians to put the right pressure in the right places, the sanctions, the votes in the United Nations, that the world said, you know, this is, we are not going to do this. There were some countries who supported it, but there was a world movement. And what we need now are the countries of the Black people outside of the United States. They are the ones who can and who will carry this. And people are saying to me that this movement has started because of what is happening with George Floyd. And I hope so. I'm hopeful that this movement where Black people outside of ground zero of racism right now, because we have racism everywhere in England and so on, as Rolanda was saying, but ground zero where everybody's looking at it and noticing it happening is in the United States. This is ground zero. And so we need to reach out. My question to Jerry and Don at this point on the program is what do we want our Caribbean governments, for instance, to do to help push that movement of change in the United States? Because I believe change in the United States is of how Black people are treated and the policies that are there, keeping them in a box, um, it's going to once there's a change in the United States, it will change the rest of the world. That's what I believe. What do we in Grenada and in the Caribbean, what do we need to do to get our politicians to do what they need to do at a level where countries can put pressure on the system?
Well, Calista, that's a very good point. I mean, I think one of the things that needs to happen across Caribbean small islands, across the small island states, including Grenada, is that they need to come together individually, but also as a collective, and ensure that they make a difference when it comes down to enacting and making decisions in regards to policies. Jerry mentioned the United Nations, of which Grenada, by way of an example, is a sovereign country, and obviously a member. But at the end of the day, yes, this is not what can change as an individual country, but it's what happens when we come together, because it's about putting that pressure and ongoing pressure on. And I think that's what we have to understand. You know, it's about governments across the Caribbean coming together, you know, and just stop acting in isolation in the way that they do. We see that across CARICOM as it is, which is a disaster in itself, and that's probably some of the reasons why, you know, we have some of the situations that we have across our countries. But I think also bringing it back here to Grenada, yeah, as Grenadian people, yeah, we have to speak out. We cannot be afraid. You know how many Grenadians are just afraid to speak out on the most simplest thing that they do not agree with? But yet we say that we are in a democracy. But they are, I come across them all the time. They may not agree with something, but they're afraid to speak out. This cannot be right. Because if you're experiencing an injustice within your country, you know, no matter how small or large it may be, and you are afraid to speak out, that it may be different issues, it may be different socio-economic, whatever, political, whatever, but you are afraid to speak out, then we are doing no better. So when we talk about, you know, we have to get our home in order, to a certain degree, I agree with that. But at the end of the day, we also have a responsibility, yes, as a Black people, to continue edifying our children and our children's children and our grandchildren to come about our history. Because at the same time, let's face it, there are some of us amongst our Black people that are not in touch with our history, that will sell their soul out because they are not in touch with their Black history. So the issue is, let me tell you, we're not going to be able to wave a magic wand overnight as a result of today's protest and everything resolve itself overnight. But we have to come together here in Grenada, across the Caribbean basin. We have to come together, and I know for sure that I will be reaching out to my Caribbean colleagues, yes, who are also looking to and have started to, you know, protest as a result of what we're seeing globally. But what I'm saying, people, we have our work to do here in Grenada. We have our work to do across the region in support of what's going on in America and in Europe. You know, how the people in our diaspora are affected. Yes, so the point that I'm making, no, we're not going to wave a wand and it's going to all change overnight, but we are going to come together. And I think one of the things is, you know, if we all commit, if every one of us commit to doing something to enact and enable change, that has to be a start. We have to start somewhere. If we keep saying, well, you know, if we go and protest, what difference is it going to make? Well, at the end of the day, if we didn't protest, then Nelson Mandela would have died in prison. That's a fact. That is a fact. If we didn't protest, the statue of Edward Colston would not have come down yesterday. These are things that makes difference. No matter how small you might see it, but all it takes is for us to commit and meaningfully commit. And don't be afraid to challenge. Why is it that we are afraid to challenge? Let's not be afraid to challenge. We have to speak up, but at the end of the day, we also have to speak up for those who don't have the voice. So this is strategically, yes. And I believe that strategy is coming. But let's not give up hope before we've even started. This is an ongoing battle. Brothers and sisters, this is an ongoing battle. And we have to be prepared to continue the fight. You know, we have to. We can't just give up.
Okay, Kitake, you've got a question?
You know, well, I mean, what Dan said, really touched home in terms of how important that unity is to lobby seriously. And it has to be a multi-pronged approach as well. And even something I was thinking about as well, like even to plan certain things, I have also the feeling that we have to go back by the river and go back in nature and thing and plan. We can't even be planning certain things on Facebook and WhatsApp where they have the system have a way to track you and see what's going on. And if you're really trying to, effect change in the system. So I think a lot of different multiple prong approaches have to be utilized as well. Because if you're in a war, you can't just try to take air lift alone. You have to go in and send men on the ground, take ship, do all kind of different maneuvers to be successful in the mission. So I think that is very important. And it all boils down to that key word, unity, where we can work together and say, this is what we want. When we see injustice in the community, when our black brother going down, we could stand up for him and defend him every day, and that could happen continuously. So we don't joke in, and we could use different things that we have with economic power. We different things we could demand because we stand up solid and we could lobby. And I think unity is the precursor. But Mr. Jerry had something to say.
Oh,
yeah.
History does not remember the name of the man in Montserrat in the 1930s. The 1930s were a tremendous period, tremendous time in the Caribbean. Governor Moyne was sent down, Lord Moyne, was sent down to the Caribbean by London.
That's right.
Because the people of the region had sent a strong message of no to Crown Colony government protest. The governor in Montserrat, history does not record the name of the man who turned over the motor car of the governor in Montserrat. But by that simple act, the death of Crown Colony was signaled, and we saw the emergence of the independence movement. But the independence movement in the Caribbean started with people like Padmore, C.L.R. James, Jomo Kenyatta, when they in 1956 held the Manchester Conference. In the United States, there was a busboy in Harlem who was washing dishes at the Theresa Hotel. He was from Vietnam. His name was Ho Chi Minh. He was joined by another young man who was a student at Columbia University, and they would all come together and wash dishes in this hotel. That young man's name was Fidel Castro, a student at Columbia University. My sisters and brothers, it's sometimes history does not tell you, there's no roadmap as to how things unfold. What happens is people of like minds sit down, and let me say, they are not all of the same race. You cannot have as a test. You cannot say the only people who can come into this room and plan a human rights struggle are Black people. It doesn't work. It will not work. If we are one human family, if the spirit of goodwill, the one that we see all across the world today, clearly in Australia, we don't have too many African Americans. Or in Belgium, we have a few refugees. These are white countries, but they are standing up because our conscience demand that we stand up, whatever your color, whatever your race, whatever your class. Callistra has asked the questions about CARICOM. I believe that CARICOM is a sick child that is yet to be formed. We have an anomalous situation at CARICOM where the only voices that are heard at CARICOM are those of the elected heads of state. It is a strange thing. The European Union is the example. We can go to look at the African Union, and we look at CARICOM, and they have something in common that is anti-democratic. Both the African Union and CARICOM excludes people who are not elected to office. So the European Parliament, no, Marie Le Pen, who heads the French right-wing party, she will never, ever win an election in France. But she has 20%, 15 to 20% of the French vote. Those people, regardless of how warped their view is, the principle is that they have a voice. Look at CARICOM. You have Kittians, you have Grenadians, you have Vincentians who have 20, 30. In Grenada, the NDC has 40% of the vote. I'm not in politics. I'm just pointing out a fact, what CARICOM can and cannot achieve. The NDC has no voice in CARICOM. We have no Caribbean Parliament. CARICOM somehow has been formed without a parliament of the people of CARICOM. So the ruling governments in the 14 or how much ever member, 22 member, how many ever they are, CARICOM governments, they have an additional platform so they can speak to themselves. They tried it in the courts. In fact, they control the courts. They were trying to see if they could bring the CCJ in. And when we say we love the CCJ, if you would only get your foot off the neck of the court, they decided, no, we'd rather we don't want to get away from it. We'd rather that we don't have another referendum. Political leaders are only as strong as the people who put them in power. I do not expect CARICOM governments who go cap in hand as mendicants to the United States, begging for aid, to be in any leadership position where they will speak to the United. In fact, I think only Hilary Beckles at the University of the West Indies and a few religious leaders, including the Catholic bishop here in Grenada, have raised their voices. The governments in CARICOM are not empowered by their people to raise their voices in any kind of coordinated protest in the United States. Why? Well, Donald Trump just announced that if you don't take any deportees, we're going to cut your visas. Now, Caribbean governments could say, because the law as it's written in the United States for deportees gives the receiving countries the right of first refusal. They could say, we don't want this Grenadian who has been in America and broke the law? Can they? Do they have the fortitude to do it? I don't see it. CARICOM has not empowered the people of the Caribbean. We have no voice. The only people with a voice at CARICOM are the elected leaders, the heads of state. Until the people of the region are emboldened in a Caribbean parliament, a CARICOM parliament. Listen, the charter that formed CARICOM calls for that parliament. The charter calls for the people of the region to be represented. So I don't expect Calistro, I don't expect CARICOM leaders to take any stand. They will only take a stand when the majority of the people are in the streets, in front of the embassies, carrying placards, demanding change, speaking on the rights of their diaspora. Look, can you imagine that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Grenada, let me say it, please. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Grenada has just announced, and I don't have anything against my Jamaican brothers and sisters because I have worked with my Jamaican brothers and sisters on a myriad amount of issues. Grenada's Foreign Affairs Ministry has not said a single word to the United States about the protection of Grenadians in diaspora who are marching in the streets. They haven't sent, the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Grenada has not sent a single memo, a sentence, to Mayor de Blasio in New York, who has announced his unbridled support for the most brutal policing we have seen in the recent weeks. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs hasn't said anything to the Mayor of New York about protecting people in diaspora. I don't expect anything from CARICOM.
So really, so really, we're in a bad way because even our politicians.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Let me correct you. No, let me correct you, sister. We are not in a bad way. The governments are in a bad way. The governments are in a bad way. The governments are bankrupt. The people are not. The United States government never supported it. It was after the March on Washington when President Johnson saw 250,000 black, brown, and white people on the Washington Mall that he said, "Oh my God, no masks. We have to sign the civil rights bill." Power concedes nothing without a struggle. You will not get any response to any of the issues that we are speaking about unless people put their bodies on the line. You have to put your bodies, that's the only way it works. If in 1970, massive number of Trinidadians did not take to the streets, black people would not get a job in banks or be in the higher up of the civil service. There used to be a paper bag test. If you're not light skinned, you're not getting no job. We have consistently fought for all the gains we've never gotten anything.
Amen. Amen.
We win. If we struggle, we win. That's like a law of nature, like a mathematical formula. 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. If you fight and struggle from the bottom, you win.
Can I just come in here? Can I just come in here? A couple of things. I just want to Jerry's touched on and really honed in on CARICOM, and I must say I concur with everything he says. And why I concur with what he says, yes, as you guys know, when we last spoke, we spoke about my, the last stages that I'm in regards to my doctorate, yes. And let me tell you, I've looked at CARICOM quite deep, quite closely. And what I would say, why we have to kind of forget CARICOM, yes? If you look at measurable objectives that CARICOM has achieved, since its inception to date. Yes, it speaks volumes. It speaks volumes. So when our Caribbean leaders parachute in, you know, to these islands and sit around a table, when you look at, drill down on the measurable objectives and the outcomes of that, it speaks volumes. Now, I'm going to leave that there, but just to home in regards to this issue around, you know, the fights and the struggles that we've had to make over the years to ensure that people of dark skin are employed, you know, within public sector and within government. That has been the same, you know, and remains the same today in the United Kingdom, and it remains in, you know, across Europe. But the saddest thing, as I said today, it remains here in Grenada. It remains here in Grenada. So we don't have to go far in regards to edifying ourselves and making that difference. This is a movement, and we all have to do our bit. But let's not sit down here and pretend, you know, that the discrimination and the indifferences are not here on the spy side. That's where we need to start from. That if we want to do anything here, whilst we're part of this movement, this is where we need to start from. We all have a right to look at ourselves. You know what I find interesting? What I find interesting in my chambers, Jerry, I don't know if you've had this experience, and Rolanda, I don't know if you've had this experience, but you come across, you know, you want to empower anyone that I employ. I want to empower. That's me. I'm a coach. I'm a mentor. Yes? But how many young people do we come across that we employ? And you're trying to engage with them, and it takes them 3 months before they can look you in your eye. When you're talking to them, they're all over the place. Their eyes are on the floor. They kind of engage with you. Again, the massa mentality. So we have to start here, and we can start here doing these, you know, edifying and making a difference and challenging, whilst at the same time we can make the difference in regards to the world movement that's happening right now in regard with Black Lives Matter. You understand? And the other movements, and make sure we contribute and making sure we speak out. You know, and holding governments to account. Holding governments to account. So that, you know, they do speak out. When we're seeing injustices across the globe, when we're seeing peer persons of the diaspora, you know, being treated differently, disproportionately because of the color of their skin. When we don't speak out, what signal are we saying? What statement are we making? Keeping quiet is no longer an option. It is no longer an option. And we all have to look, and this is the point I'm making, as a Black people, we all have to look at ourselves, look inside of ourselves, and start asking that question. What, you know, sometimes we hear the politicians, not what you're going to do for Grenada, not what Grenada can do for you, what you're going to do for Grenada. Well, hear what now? This is the time. It's what are you going to do for this new world order? No matter how small, whether it's here in Grenada, whether it's across the Caribbean basin, or whether you're going to make noises, you know, and form part of that wider movement. We all have a collective responsibility.
I ask you to forgive me, Sister Dawn, and my friends, brother and sister, please forgive me, but I had something else scheduled for this evening. I'm
okay.
forced to say goodnight. And can we talk again soon? Thank you very much for having me on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay.
Jerry.
All right. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks
Yes,
for
Don,
coming
we'll
on.
speak
Thanks
tomorrow.
for coming on.
Yeah, we'll speak tomorrow, Jerry.
Again, yes. All right. So it's Conversation 473, and we are just about out of time, actually. I want to thank Jerry Edwin, who had to run off to another appointment, for being on our program. And of course, Don Dakota, who is becoming a regular on the program. Jerry and Don were today part of a big development, a big happening. And Rolanda McQueen was also there as part of a big development outside of the US Embassy, where Grenadians came out to protest not just what has happened to George Floyd in Minneapolis, but the picture that it paints of the situation that Black people face in the United States and in other parts of the world, and the George Floyd situation seeming to have empowered and raised a movement for change. And I know Kitaka is worried about whether or not we're going to make a lot of noise for the next few weeks and then forget about it and end up back in the same boat. So fingers crossed that the movement will continue the way that the apartheid struggle continued, with Black people in all corners of the globe, adding their bodies, their strength, and their voice to saying Free South Africa, that we can free the African Americans, and at some point that we can live to see this day where Black Americans are not being shot just because of the color of the skin, or can't get to go to good schools, or can't get to eat good food, proper food. But these are some of the struggles that we face here in Grenada as well. And Jerry Edwin said, power concedes nothing without struggle. And I keep saying on this program over and over, this person sent that long post, why are we not protesting about this and why are we not protesting about that? What I want to say to that Facebook post person who posted is, why are you not marching in the streets? Why are you not standing in front of the office of the Prime Minister and in front of the office of the Minister of Health with your placard? Why are you not going through your village and gathering up your people and facing them and saying no? Why are you not stopping what is happening to us here in this country? So hopefully the fact that that people came out today and stood in front of the embassy of the powerful United States is going to be encouragement for us as Grenadians to muster up our courage to deal with our problems here in Grenada. We cannot fear the leaders. We cannot fear them, because if we fear them, we will die. We will.
Kalisha, before I go, I would like to make an appeal to the Prime Minister for the prisoner, the refugee that has been in Richmond Hill for 11 months. I am appealing to the Prime Minister to investigate it, especially when you see, I'm sure when the Prime Minister went to New York, he was an illegal immigrant. And I would, to have one of our brothers suffering in prison.
Ms. McQueen, we are not aware of what the Prime Minister's immigration status
No, I'm not saying, I'm not saying.
Well, yeah, no, you said you were sure, but we don't know what his immigration status was when he went. So,
well, most people,
we can wonder and speculate, but we can't.
Well, most people during that time when they went to America, most of them went on holiday and they got their papers. So if he didn't, I'm sure 99% of people did. And I would just like to appeal, especially with what is
actually when I know, but actually he went. I think he would have gone with student credentials because he went to school in the United States. So
okay. Well, what I'm trying to say is we have a man up there in prison now for 11 months. He's an African. He's a Black man. We cannot be protesting about George Floyd in America when we have somebody in our prison here who is seeking freedom as well. So I would like people to know that he is there, and let us don't forget him. That is it.
Okay.
Can I just say?
Go ahead, Don.
Sorry, Kalisha. No, Kalisha, you go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just want to say. I was just going to say.
Don, go ahead.
Okay, I just want to say on the final note, one of the things that's very important, rightfully so, is that this, today is not just a single day in regards to what we have done and what we have achieved. And, it has to continue. And I just want to let you and your listeners know that we will be back at the embassy on Saturday between 1 to 4, again to protest. And that's we're setting the trend on how we need to go on.
Yeah, and Kalista, before we go, for me, I love to see that the black community can unite, and it all goes well for uniting for a common cause. And I urge people out there to spend time to nurture the black family, educate the children about the history so they could be strong. I urge the Caribbean leaders to make connections with Africa. That is your nation state, that is home, that is mama, so that we could have that link where that so much millions and billions of people could stand up with us and say, all right, that is a black brother, he has a home here, treat him properly wherever he is on any part of the continent or any part of the planet. So for me, I always go back to it, unity and family, because once the family is strong, then the family could stand up and the family could unite as a community and we could lobby and get things done. So peace and love to everybody and stay safe.
All right, so I want to thank our viewers for coming on the program and for viewing the program. I want to thank our special guests, Don and Jerry, who were on before, for being part of it, and Rolanda and Kitaka, as always, a pleasure to sit with you on the Conversation 473. We will be back during the week with more topics. We'll be discussing the issue with the elderly in Grenada in an upcoming program. The issues that are affecting them, just generally the policies of the country that impact on them negatively, impact on them positively, what situations they're facing, the returnees, the elderly returnees, the medical insurance situations, accessing their medication, taxation of medication that interferes with their ability to get their medication, which if they were in the UK still or the United States still, they would not have difficulties getting. So those kinds of issues we'll be talking about that on the program, and more great topics as the week continues. And just before I go, the Rolanda did say call on the government to investigate that situation with the gentleman who has been at the prison for 11 months. He was charged with immigration violations. So the details of it, we can't get into the details of it, of course, but the fact is that to keep someone in prison for 11 months without a trial is certainly a violation of their constitutional, or of their rights, or of their civil rights. You cannot just charge somebody and throw them in prison, and then there everybody has a right to a timely trial. And he has been denied that. No one can say that 11 months is not an excessively long time to keep somebody in prison on immigration violations of all things, without dispensing with the matter one way or the other. So certainly the Minister of Legal Affairs and the Minister of National Security may want to pay attention to that, because our house is already in disarray and we do not want to make things worse by having our human rights ratings in the international community drop any further because we are treating people in such a disgraceful manner. So that's Conversation 473. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you again soon.
Can't breathe. We want justice, 'cause there won't be no peace. If you don't give us justice, you won't get no peace. No peace. Fire burn them light. Do you think we are fools? Separation has been your greatest tool, but now we together, you are begging us to cool. After you've been so brutal and cruel, We cannot take it much longer. Time to rise up and be stronger. Freedom feast for every fallen soldier. Judge, we are fighting for your justice all over our land.
Want justice, 'cause there won't be no peace. If you don't give us justice, you won't get no peace. No peace.
Police officers should be the law keepers, but some of them behave like the night creeper. Only want to hunt us down like creatures, behaving like modern day lynchers. Do you remember the days of slavery? Mental change, we about to break down. Too much of brutal murders of brothers and sisters. We need some justice, tell me what's happening. Lifetime for them cops who stand and watch him die. Nobody was stopping it.
We want justice.